What's up, it's Marco, Sage of Soccer, and today I'll be talking about the MLS College Showcase. This is a chance for college players to show their stuff before MLS scouts in hopes to get drafted in the 2023 MLS Draft. These are players who are the top players in the country from all around, though there are no players from the College Cup. That's going on at the same time as this. I did a video on the top prospects in the College Cup already, and you have to imagine that some players missed out due to fatigue from the tournament, or maybe injuries, but there are a lot of really good players on this list who will likely be drafted in the MLS Draft. A lot of players who could be given a Generation Adidas contract, which will allow them to leave school early, and let's get into it. We have some good players to talk about. First player I want to talk about is CJ Fodrey out of San Diego State University. This guy's a freshman, the youngest American in this draft. He'll likely be a freshman All-American and was one of the most electric players in the country. This guy is fast, a good finisher with both of his feet, and he's left-footed, which is huge as a U.S. prospect for an attacker. I think he has that technical baseline. You see him in combination play. He can make some really good one-touch passes and layoffs, which is really good. Fast, good at dribbling, really good finisher. He's been playing a bit of a left wing position at San Diego State. He could obviously play out right, cutting inside. I think he could play up top. He's 6'2". I think that he looks everything like a really good prospect. He needs a Generation Adidas deal to get drafted. I have to assume that it will be given, and looks like a great prospect. I actually knew about this guy going into the season. You couldn't watch. There wasn't any film on him aside from his few minutes at the USL with San Diego Loyal. He's already played some pro minutes with them, and this guy, he looks really good. I would not be opposed to him getting called into a U20 or U19 camp. He's a 2004 player, and I think he looks really good. He's the youngest guy available, but I think he's got the most potential in this draft. When you look at St. Louis City FC, they have the first pick in the draft. They already spent expansion draft picks on Nico Giacchini and Indiana Vassilev, and they're both kind of similar players. Vassilev actually has that left foot that you really like in Fodrey, so maybe you go with more of a true striker and a Duncan McGuire, who I talked about in the College Cup video. But Fodrey, he looks really good, and you might just have to take him with his potential. The next guy I want to talk about is Joseph Akpunonu, a center back out of Bowling Green, and this guy looks like a really good prospect. He was actually Bowling Green's top scorer as a center back. Granted, 3 of those goals were penalties, but still, the fact that they trust him enough to give him penalties, that shows a lot. He's a beast in the air, obviously, from his goals. And he is really good with the ball at his feet. He can pick out a pass. He's a really technical player. He plays as a left-sided center back. He's right-footed, though, but I honestly wasn't able to tell until I saw those penalties, because he's good with both of his feet. He's good even under pressure, and I really like that on-ball ability. On top of that, pretty fast, good instincts, and I think that he looks everything like a pro center back. This guy at a Bowling Green, I think he looks really good. He's a good center back with ball skills, physical skills, and, well, he's probably not a day one starter. Center backs, you really have to, grow into them. Center backs, they get better as they get older. I think that he could be a really good player, somebody to take a look at from a national team perspective. And honestly, just with Bowling Green, and the guy we'll get into next, it's really a shame that the MAC discontinued soccer, because they had a lot of good programs and a lot of talent coming from there. Next guy I want to talk about is Dyson Clapier out of Akron. He's listed as a third-year player. You have extra eligibility with the 2020 season and possible red shirts, but he's a 2002 player, eligible for the Olympics. And something interesting is he comes from Portland's academy, so I think Portland would be able to offer them a homegrown contract, if they had any interest in playing young American players. But just something to keep in mind, he would need a Generation Adidas deal to get drafted. While he was in Portland and playing for Portland too, he got some USL Championship experience like Fodrey, and he was listed as a third-team All-American this year, which huge honor, especially as an underclassman. And as a player, he's a 5'11 winger. He got 7 goals, 7 assists this season, which is second most goals on Akron, top assists. I think he's got some pretty good speed, not great like Fodrey, but good speed. He's a right-footed player. You like to cut inside on that right foot, but he's got a good cross with his left foot as well. Good dribbler and solid finisher. I have to say, speed isn't top end. I'm not sure if he's got the great technical ability that some other players have, but he looks like a really high floor player who can come in. You just know he'll do a job. He has a good goal contributions. He's going to be kind of fast, and I think that he has a good amount of potential and looks like a decent player in this draft class. The last generation Adidas prospect is Kalani Kossa-Rienzi. He's out of Washington University, and another junior slash third year player, another 2002. This year he popped up with 3 goals and 3 assists, but for Washington, he's been playing a defensive midfield role, and he's been a workhorse for them. A good athlete, just providing solid defensive work and a really high energy. Like, he's got a motor, he's keeping running for throughout entire games, and I can really see him helping out a squad defensively. He's 5'8". He's also played right back a bit for Washington, so a little bit of versatility there. One thing, though, is that when Washington, they played, they kind of bypassed their midfield a lot. They'd go long, and the midfield, their job was mostly to win the ball back. So similar to some NFL prospects, he hasn't been asked to do too much on the ball. I'm not sure how much he can do. I think that's probably why he was invited to this showcase. Just get to prospects and get to see if his on-ball ability can match his defensive ability. I'm not sure if it can, and at 5'8", his defensive potential is a little bit limited in a defensive midfield position, especially in a physical league like the MLS. But you can definitely see the potential in his defensive work, and I think there's something there. Now onto the rest of the players. These guys are all seniors, either redshirt, juniors, or their 4th years. They're eligible for the MLS draft no matter what. And the first guy I want to mention is Christian Soto out of Washington. He's similar to the guy we just talked about, except even smaller at 5'5", but might be a bit better of a player. Again, another year of experience, but still, he looks pretty good in that similar role. Good defensive work. It remains to be seen how well he translates. Kind of the same thing I said about him, the same things could be said about Soto. So I just wanted to mention him. Now on to probably my favorite senior player in this draft, and that is MD Myers out of Rutgers. And this guy has been insane this year. 13 goals, 7 assists, one of the top scorers in the nation. And just as a player, he looks really good. He's a great finisher, but alongside that, he's got really good hold-up play along with a great first touch, a good left foot, and really good movement. On top of that, he's just a really brave player. I don't know how to say it, but just when the ball's in the box, he'll put his body on the line. I liked his pressing ability. He's 6 foot tall, which helps him out with his good hold-up play. The only knock against him is he's not an elite athlete, but I think he looks like a really good player. And honestly, he's out of the Philadelphia Union Academy, my Philadelphia Union. And I'm looking at him, it's we let Corey Burke go. Marcos Zambrano Delgado, he just left the academy. I'm not too big a fan of Chris Donovan, and I don't think Quinn Sullivan, he's going to be away for a while. Why not sign MD Myers as striker? I know this is about the draft, but give him a homegrown deal. I think he should join the Philadelphia Union. He looks like a really good player, and I would want him on the Philadelphia Union. If not, a team's going to be lucky to have him in the draft. Next, I want to talk about 2 players out of Maryland, Nick Richardson and Chris Rindov. Both of them are 2 pretty similar players, and just they are solid guys who I think can contribute, but probably a bit low of a ceiling. Richardson's a good right back. He was a 3rd-team All-American. He's got a good cross on him, a lot of energy, and solid defensively. He picked up 3 goals and 8 assists, which I believe led Maryland, and just looks like a really solid guy. He's not an elite athlete. I don't think he's great technically, but I think he could come in and contribute immediately. And similarly, Chris Rindov, okay on the ball, but when given time, but probably more of a no-nonsense guy. Good in the air, and I think he can really help out a team that wants to get him. I mean, center backs, they're a bit different. You have to really help integrate them into the team, but I think they're 2 pro-ready players who could help out, though probably don't have U.S. national team potential. Next up are 2 players at Georgetown. First, Aidan Rocha. He's a pretty interesting case because he was a right back for most of his career at Georgetown, but he switched to center midway through this year, and he looked really good, and it coincided with Georgetown becoming a really good team. They were a bit mixed before that, but him moving into the midfield really helped them out. So he also has the possibility of playing right back. He's a former youth national team player, and I have to imagine that was mostly due to his technical ability. He's a 5'8" guy, so not the biggest, and maybe as he started to lose his height advantage over some players, he fell out of the youth national team fold, but I think he might have found his position to be good enough to get to that next level now. As a player, I think he's got a pretty good cross at him from his time at left or right back, but on top of that, he's confident on the ball, and he's really good technically. He has that technical baseline you need to be a really good player. And on top of that, he's not bad defensively as a former right back. I mean, he's not the biggest guy. I wouldn't put his defensive abilities up there with the Washington boys, but I think that he looks like a really solid player, and I think there's actually room to grow for him not spending too much time at center mid. I think he's definitely somebody worth a pick. And next, we got a Daniel Wu, also out of Georgetown. He's 6 foot tall as a center back, second team All-American, which is really good. And he's kind of like a weird case to talk about because he has like every attribute you need as a center back, but just a little bit off. Like he reads the game well, good 1v1 defender, like steps up confidently. Another player who I feel like is noticeably brave, similar to MD Myers. All right in the air. He's not bad on the ball, but like a little bit shaky. Like you'll notice like you'll be worried when he's on the ball and doing something good. It's not to say he will screw up, but you can tell there's like a bit of room to grow. In the air, he could be a bit better. I wouldn't put it out of the question that he'd be moved to right back. And I think he's like a solid player who might be a bit of a project, but I think he's somebody worth taking. And speaking of projects, we got Patrick Agyemang, who is out of Rhode Island. He's a redshirt senior striker who is 6'4". And this year he had 7 goals and 2 assists in 14 games, 10 starts, and there wasn't really much talent around him at Rhode Island. He was the top scorer despite missing a good amount of time. That's not too impressive of a stat line, but I should mention that he got a goal and an assist in his toughest game started against St. Louis. And he's 6'4", a physical beast as a player, and he's got some pretty good speed. On top of that, obviously good in the air. And he's a pretty good dribbler. Like, you see him, he moves around pretty well, like, especially for a big man, moves around really well. And pretty, like, got some all-right finishing, decent hold-up play. I don't think he's great on the ball, and I think he is more of a project guy who, if drafted, like, you'd have to develop, and, like, at that height, with that strength, like, and how he moves around, like, you have to take note of him. He has the potential to be a game breaker, but I think it will take a bit of time for him to get better. And on top of that, another player who looks like a project guy is Isaiah Reid out of Clemson. You might remember him for scoring the game-winning goals in the national championship game last year. He had a brace in the final, and the interesting thing about him is he's a forward, but he's listed in the showcase roster as a left back. And that leads me to believe that a position change is going to be happening. And when I'm looking at him, it's like, okay, he's got a decent aerial ability. I like his speed, which is good for a defender, but he really hasn't shown that. Like, it's hard to project that transition. And going forward, he's not really that good of a crosser. He's more good, like, when he's arriving in the box. So, like, I think it's an interesting case. Like, we need more left backs in the American system, so I'm not opposed to that. And, like, I am interested in seeing how this goes, but I can't really project how good he'll be at that position because I really don't know how good Isaiah Reid will be. 2 more outfield players to talk about. We got John Klein out of St. Louis. He's a small attacking midfielder. He could also probably play a wing out of St. Louis. Redshirt player. He went to Portland's academy, so Portland should have his homegrown rights, but again, they're Portland. This season, he had 7 goals and 5 assists. Last year, he was the top assister in the NCAA. You might remember that St. Louis squad had, like, I think 3 Generation Adidas prospects. Another guy who was drafted, like, he had Betcher, Kip Keller, Isaiah Parker. I'm forgetting somebody else, but just a really good St. Louis team last year. And he carried his form over. I think as a player, he's a pretty good finisher, has a good first touch, really good presser, and a good passer, though. On the downside, not really that fast. He doesn't offer much defensively outside of pressing, and kind of more of a straight line player, like not really that creative, and hasn't shown a great technical ability. I think he could definitely help out a team, especially in like MLS Next Pro. But I think with his skill set, you'd probably rather give that time to like a homegrown player. And it's tough to see him like really having that high of a ceiling, but he does have a good amount of ability. He's a really good passer, and you might be able to help out a team. And last outfield player is João Victor Souza out of Boston College, 6'2" center back. He's a senior this year, out of NYCFC's academy, where he's part of that really good team with Gio Reyna and Joe Scally. He missed a lot of the season with injury, but he was still an All-ACC third-team player despite that. And just a strong defender with some good positioning, and when given time, he can pick out a pass, but he goes to ground like a lot. Like, he makes a lot of slide tackles, which I I don't really agree with that as a defender. Like, it works for like an Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but I think that's not the best. And he's noticeably reckless on the field, which could be a good thing at some times, but it might also explain the injuries. And I feel like he's a bit of a risky pick. I think, like, if everything works out for him, he could be as solid of a center back as some of the other guys I was mentioning, but it's probably the riskiest pick out of anybody on this list for me. Lastly, we're on to the goalkeepers. Traditionally, out of college, goalkeepers are probably the best player on an international level. We've had a lot of really good goalkeepers who came out of college. Matt Turner's one recently. And there are some pretty good players in this. I will say that on one of them, I just wasn't able to find film on him. But for the rest of them, we got some pretty good players. I think the top goalkeeping prospect on this list is Holden Trent out of High Point University. 6'2" goalkeeper, good size. He's a redshirt senior, so he's actually a 99 player. And I think he makes some good saves. He showed up some good athleticism and is pretty good at controlling his box. He's confident when coming out of the box to make some punches. And I think he looks like the best goalkeeper out of this group. I will say he hesitates at times, and he's not great with his feet, but seems like a solid player. Then we have Sam Fowler out of Washington. He's a redshirt junior. I think Seattle has his homegrown rights, so he could just sign there possibly. I will say he's 6 foot tall, which not ideal, but not bad, especially in the MLS. We've had guys like Zach McMath, that Canadian goalkeeper on LAFC, and I think there is like a possibility for him. He has some really good highs, and like you can see that he's a good keeper, but he's very erratic. He makes a lot of mistakes. You might remember in last year's College Cup final, he made a mistake leading to an Isaiah Reid goal. And just when I was watching film on the other Washington players, he was still making mistakes, and like it was a bit noticeable. I'm not sure if I'd take a chance on Sam Fowler if I'm Seattle, but if you have like a late round pick, like he definitely has some very good moments, but I think there's better I take other goalkeepers as a project keeper. And lastly, we have Cole Jensen, the guy who I could not find film on. He's out of Xavier, and Xavier, like, none of their, like, they have no games, like, just available, no full games. They're in the Big East, which their games are behind, like, a paywall on some site that only offers, like, Big East games, so not getting that. And like on top of that, when Xavier posts highlights, it's only them scoring goals. The little footage I got is from like Creighton's YouTube channel posting their highlights, which I've seen a couple of his saves. So from the little footage I can find, he gets down pretty well despite being a 6'5" goalkeeper. I will say that this is his first year playing despite being a senior or redshirt junior, I guess. He'd have 2 years of eligibility left because of the 2020 season. But despite that, he was a third-team All-American in his first year, and on top of being a 6'5" keeper, like, I think that screams potential, and the fact that he was invited here over some other keepers, like, I think that's a pretty big deal, and I'd be pretty excited about Cole Jensen. I can't tell you how good he'll be, because there wasn't any film on him, but from what I can gather, I think he's a pretty good prospect. I can see some potential there, and I think he's worth drafting. That's everybody in this college showcase to talk about from a U.S. men's national team perspective. I read a whole argument about Bright and if he was USA eligible. I don't think he is, and there are some players who might be, but I'm pretty sure this is everybody who's U.S. eligible. And I really like this group of players. I think Fodrey looks like a top prospect. Akpunonu seems like a really good player to me, and I've really liked MD Myers, and I think there's good potential in Cole Jensen as a goalkeeper. And just as a U.S. national team fan, I think we need to keep an eye on the college game. Like, it's obviously not the best path, but I think it's getting up there with, like if you think about a guy like Chris Brady at Chicago Fire, like, would his career have stalled if instead of sitting on the bench this year for them, he played a full season at, like, let's say Northwestern or Notre Dame? Like, I think that would have definitely helped him, and I think it really helped out a CJ Fodrey this year. So I think it's something that we shouldn't ignore and that could be a potential for us. And on top of that, we've got the late bloomers in there as well, like a Cole Jensen. So maybe there is good potential for players out of college, and I think it's something that we should keep our eye on. And yeah, that's all we're going to talk about. I think there'll be some good players. The draft is actually coming up in less than a week. It's in 2022, despite being the 2023 MLS draft, because the MLS makes sense. Yeah, that's all I've talked about. Yeah, see ya.